Good morning. We are live. Welcome to CertaPay's Coffee Break series. This is Coffee Break number 3. Today we're talking about vaccines and your business. And welcome. We're so glad you're here today. And every time you join us, I'm your host, Rachel Camella, and I am here with Cindy Merkel, our amazing moderator. And we're both drinking coffee, I'm sure. I have a delicious Guatemala. This is El Diamante from Guatemala, and I made it as a pour over. So cheers, everybody. Cindy, what do you have?
I actually have Cuban coffee today.
Yes, nice and strong.
Straight up Cuban coffee, the best.
Ah, delicious. Claire probably has one of those too. All right, let's get going. So the reason this is an important conversation is because there's things happening with this right now. So I know what we wanted to do is just kind of put your mind at ease and help you through some of these questions. And, you know, certainly it's a little bit of a difficult navigation at this point. And part of it is because there's so much that we don't know. So first is our disclaimer. We are not epidemiologists. We are not vaccine experts. We don't work for the FDA. We simply wanted to give you a perspective from an HR lens. And so what we're telling you today is we're not telling you to vaccinate, and we are not telling you not to vaccinate. So get ready for pretty much 30 minutes of me saying nothing in a very strategic way. I'm going to remind everybody to stay muted so we can keep that background noise down. And so no offense on that. I'm just keeping the background noise down. All right, let's roll. Cindy, we good?
Go ahead. I'm ready when you are.
All right, we'll keep going. So the first question is, can we mandate? Is it legal to mandate? And the short answer here is yes. And you might even know we do this in some format now. You know, like healthcare providers might have a flu shot requirement, or certain organizations might have vaccine requirements for traveling to different countries. We require our students in public schools to have certain vaccinations. There are things that we do in our culture already where we require some vaccinations. So this isn't all that different, but we don't really mandate it in the workplace. You know, there's a few select ones where we do, but for the most part, it's not something that we do. So is it legal to do it? It is, but there are a lot of technical things to consider. And, you know, whether or not this is something you want to take on as a business, I think you need to be careful to have all of the information first. And, you know, there's some things about our current political climate that also make it a little bit different. You know, this one kind of has that shadow, that layer of politics on top of it. So making it a condition of employment might be a little bit of a difficult go as a business owner. So again, a lot of things to think about, and we want to be careful when we make these decisions. So some of the things we think about right off the bat is, you know, the EEOC indicates that generally you can do something like this, but you really have to prove that the individual poses a direct threat to the health and safety of others. So when you take that into consideration, you know, it may make more sense to look at other options and how you can keep people safe. And if you do this, when you talk about ADA regulations and the way the EEOC looks at things, you may really need to carve out some exemptions. So an employee could seek a medical exemption. They could seek a religious exemption. And then you would be obligated to provide some alternate accommodations. So these are things you want to think of. You know, maybe you can provide PPE or separate somebody in the workplace with social distance, require masks, allow them to work remotely, different things. So if somebody says, I need to be exempt for this reason or that reason, and you're in a position to create alternate accommodations, you want to think about some of those things and include that in your policy if you choose to do this. Another important thing that you want to think about is individual states may provide employment protections. So while there may be a general approval on a mandate federally, individual states may say, no, we're in favor of the employee, or we're going to provide protections about terminating employees or making it a condition of employment. So be very careful to understand where your state falls and what kind of protections may be in place in your particular state. It will make a difference. So then the next three are kind of layers of this that we've got to take into consideration: concerted activity, safety, and confidentiality. So let's dig into those a little bit. Everybody good so far? Got you, Cindy?
Yep, we're good.
All right. So when we talk about the National Labor Relations Board, there are protected there is protected activity. So a concerted activity is something that has to do with the work. So if you have a policy in place where vaccines are mandated, that now becomes a protected conversation. So employees can now complain about it openly, they can discuss it openly, they can talk about their view openly, and this will be considered protected concerted activity. And it doesn't mean they're exempt from having to follow the policy of getting the vaccination if that's what you choose to do. But it means if they are verbal and vocal and complain about it to other people, you cannot terminate them as a result of that. And furthermore, you cannot retaliate against them for having a verbal opinion and being vocal about it. So keep that in mind, that any kind of concerted activity surrounding that will be protected under the NLRB. And the next thing to think about is safety. So there's kind of two angles here when you're requiring a vaccination. So if we look at under OSHA's general duty clause, this means we are obligated to provide a safe working environment for our employees. And so we're all following this general duty clause on a regular basis. And this was a big discussion initially, knowing that we've got COVID to manage in the workplace. So under the general duty clause, you're already following things. You've got to provide a safe environment. So masks or social distance or quarantine days or providing PPE. These are things that you're most likely already doing now as a part of your general duty clause. So some people are providing the hypothetical that having people vaccinated in the workplace is creating a safe work environment for everybody. So that's kind of one angle. We don't really have any live examples of that yet. These are hypotheticals that are being discussed, but that's one angle. Another safety piece to think about is if you mandate this and then there's an adverse reaction. So vaccines go through rigorous testing, regulatory testing and review, but sometimes still there are adverse reactions to vaccines and you don't know when or who, or, sometimes that may happen. So if you're requiring somebody to get a vaccination as a condition of employment with you, and one of those individuals has an adverse reaction, you're now looking at a work comp situation. And now you're looking at the expenses with that and a change in your mod rate and other kinds of increases. So these are all things to think about when you think about the big picture of this decision. Any questions so far? How are we doing, Cindy?
We're good. Keep going. I'm sure there'll be tons at the end.
Okay. So this is an interesting layer, and perhaps one of the reasons that typically businesses don't require or request vaccination records. But if you have if you have a vaccination program and you gain information based on that, it's considered protected health information. So you would have to follow the HIPAA compliance when it comes to gaining confidential information like this. And vaccination records and vaccine information is no different. But then let's take it one step further. So if you actually collect vaccination records, OSHA requires you to keep those records for 30 years from the termination date. 30 years. I don't think we have any other files or records that we're required to keep that long. So, and this may be why it's typically not a practice that we see. So something to think about before you add a vaccine mandate as a condition of employment. You want to go back through all of these requirements and have a plan in place so that you can stay in compliance with some of these other pieces before you do that.
Rachel,
and then finally, yeah.
I have a question. If you were to start requiring it as a condition of employment today, what do you do about your current staff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's something that you would have to address in your policy. So would it be retroactive? You would be requiring it from everybody in the organization, or would it be only new hires? These are things that you would address in a policy if you were going to do that. And, you know, always, again, talking about the HR lens, we want to do all things that eliminate any possibility of discrimination. So you would have to ask yourself, if I said everybody has to have that vaccination, am I willing to lose some of my employees because of it? So knowing that there may be people who ask for accommodations, there may be people who choose not to do it, there may be people who leave because it's a requirement. So knowing that you want to treat everybody with equal treatment, you want to be careful and understand that you have to be able to stick to your own policy in order to be neutral and fair to everybody. So again, Cindy, that is such a great point because it's something to think about. So let's go to the last point about confidentiality. Another piece is the GINA Act. I don't know if it's something, again, it's not something that's really thought of or talked about all that much because it's not something most businesses do. But the GINA Act is the Generic Information Non-Discrimination Act. And this says that you have to warn employees ahead of time if you're requesting vaccination records because they may provide you with information that has additional generic information that could be then used against them in some discrimination format. So before you can get any vaccination records, you will be obligated to notify and warn your employees not to provide you any additional generic information as part of their vaccination proof. So these are pieces that maybe people aren't aware of, but they would be very important if you're going to require this as a condition of employment. So the most important thing, and then we can kind of talk about, you know, having a policy, but this may really put it into perspective in terms of the timeline and where we are right now. So I want to know, does anybody know what EUA stands for? And you can just type it in the chat and let us know. Anybody? I'm seeing crickets. Cindy, you got anything?
I'm Googling it.
Ellen gave us an answer. Thanks, Ellen. You get bonus points. So it is emergency use authorization. And why is this important? Well, this is important because this is where we are right now. The FDA sometimes will issue an EUA, an emergency use authorization, if the general public will benefit from some of the products. And so you can see, that normal vaccinations take years to get through the FDA's real protocols. And we've gotten to some vaccinations here pretty quickly. So the reason is because we're in EUA. So all of the vaccines right now that are available are EUA. They are not fully approved. We're still technically in an experimental phase. So this is important information because, when you see something, Pfizer has an authorized vaccine. Moderna has an authorized vaccine. Nobody so far has a fully approved vaccine. And so the other piece of the FDA's requirement on an EUA is that recipients have the right to decline. So this is a direct contradiction. So if you're going to mandate it in the workplace as a condition of employment, then the employee under the FDA's requirement has to have the right to decline. So potentially opening yourself up to wrongful termination or other risks, other legal issues, it might be wise right now to just pay attention and wait until there's a fully approved vaccine. And at that point, consider the possibility of adding it as a condition of employment. But until then, people have to have the right to decline it. So I think that's something that's very important to understand, that right now we're in a phase where requiring it might be contradictory to the FDA's own guidelines. So at this point, it might make more sense to just encourage it or add information, direct people to the FDA, to the DOL, to the CDC, the World Health Organization. Send people to gather their own information and make their own decisions right now, rather than requiring it. And part of the reason is that things are changing. We still have so many pieces of information coming in on a regular basis and changing on a regular basis. And, the other thing we think of is if you have 100 people in your office and 50 of them have chosen to get the vaccine, 25 have already had COVID, others are working remotely, do you really need it in your workplace? And so this may be something that each individual will make the decision that will end up making your workplace safe according to the OSHA guidelines. So what we're saying is it might make more sense to just encourage rather than require. Stay tuned. We're going to keep you up to date on all of these pieces, and we know it's such a good question, and we're watching the changes, and we're keeping you informed as best we can.
Rachel,
how about some questions? Yeah.
I just have a question, or maybe something you can expound upon. What are the ramifications or the risk when some employers are offering the vaccinations? You get a bonus, or you get, whatever, you get, I don't know, $100 gift card to Target. How does that play in when you're kind of coercing the employee with a bonus?
We are seeing a little bit of that. And again, you want to think about all these other pieces of it. Are you being fair to everybody? Are you offering something to everybody? And if some people are making the choice, that's, they're choosing to do this. And perhaps, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to seek some legal advice, get some documentation that says, I have chosen to do this on my own. It had nothing to do with my employment. Getting some legal advice with some of this right now is probably not a bad idea. When we talk about the HR point of view, we really want to have a safe environment for everybody and be fair to everybody. Make sure there's no possibility of discrimination or any kind of treating people differently, or if you don't offer the exemptions, or if you don't offer different types of situations in terms of providing PPE or separate workstation, remote work. If you have to offer some alternate accommodations, you want to think about that. But when you offer something in return for going for the vaccine, you might be crossing over into a little bit of a barrier. So you want to be careful about that. I would say get some legal advice and maybe have some backup documentation.
Wouldn't that also play into somewhat of a HIPAA violation? Like, for example, you're never supposed to tell in the office who has COVID, just someone in the office. Would that rule also cross over to this? So any type of reward for getting the vaccination would also kind of almost violate HIPAA. Sally Sue got a $100 gift card today. Then you're now telling the rest of the staff that Sally Sue has gotten a vaccination.
That's right. This is protected information. This is confidential health information. So having a big incentive program is a little bit risky because of that. And I saw some questions here. We had, did you see those, Cindy?
Yep. I was
Maureen. Yeah, go ahead.
The first one says, if you do offer a quote-unquote incentive gift and there is a vaccination, who is liable? Oh, I'm sorry, if there is a reaction. We did discuss that, but if you want to expound upon a reaction to the vaccination.
So if you offered an incentive and somebody chose to go do that, it doesn't make you liable. But again, if you're considering these things, please get legal advice and get some documentation that will protect you as a business. I would again say at this point, I wouldn't even put incentives or gifts associated with this right now. I would let everybody make their own decisions and choices. And part of that is because of that emergency use authorization category. We're just not at a fully approved level yet. So I think it's very important that the individual employees are making informed decisions and making the choices that are best for them. And there are people who want to go get the vaccine as quickly as possible, and I think that's great. There are people who are not ready. They want to wait, and that's great. And so adding the layer of an incentive may push somebody before they're ready. And so getting that piece of it secured and letting people make their own decisions is the best way to protect you. If you're not sending anybody to go get a vaccine, you won't be liable for it. So, the thought there is protect yourself by not engaging in that level just yet.
The next question is along the same lines. What about a policy for reimbursing up to X dollars towards the cost of the vaccination without requiring it? I think that falls into the same pitfall of an incentive or a gift by paying for it.
So same thing, you want to think about all those layers that go with it. And, maybe you have some other incentive, like a general health and safety incentive that everybody could qualify for in some way. And it's not really tied to the vaccine. I would say, and the other thing is, I don't know what the costs are. I don't know what the costs are of the vaccine right now.
I was more.
So
I asked the question. I was more concerned about employees who may not have health coverage, being concerned about costs, and I would hate that to be an inhibitor. Right. So I wouldn't be necessarily trying to incent them as much as making sure they felt like they couldn't get it because of a cost issue.
Okay, so, that is a really good point too. So you might offer something that everybody would have the option to use toward, X number of things. Maybe everybody gets $20 towards some health improvement of some kind. Maybe they can use it for a vaccine. They can use it for 1 month at Crunch Gym. Maybe they can use it for one yoga class, or, if there's some way to offer it to everybody for general health instead of saying, here's a reimbursement for the vaccine. And again, it's a great question for, a lawyer. If you want to add a program like that, get some legal advice and have a document drafted that supports you and backs you up.
Steve jumped in to say that as to the best of his knowledge, no one's charging as of yet. And I was going to say the same thing. I'm not sure that anybody's charging.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that. I don't think there's a charge right now. I think, that's one of the things. So if somebody wants to get it and they can't afford it, they will be able to get it at this point. But here's the other thing, there's a long line of people and the order is pretty specific. We've got elderly, we've got healthcare providers and first responders, and we're just barely at the tip of the iceberg in the elderly category now. So the rest of the general population is months away from that list. So,
does anybody have any other questions? Please feel free to type them in the chat box. I have no other questions at this point.
All right, fantastic. Well, as always, thank you so much for joining us for our Coffee Break series. We're so glad you're with us. CertaPay appreciates you. We are here to support you. We are here to answer your questions and help you through this. And please reach out to us anytime if there's anything we can do to help you. If you want to get some questions or understand some of our services, you've got an email on the screen. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you have an idea for a coffee break, don't hesitate to send it in. We are taking all of the ideas from all of you and creating coffee breaks and content that will help you and your business. So keep your eyes out on our website, CertaPay.com. You can find our coffee break recordings under the news tab. And next week, we'll be continuing on our employee life cycle coverage. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.